All right, joining us now again from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Souichi Terada of MassLive.com. Souichi, we're bringing in here. You saw it firsthand live, but you just had some fresh eyes in this game. You just rewatched the entire magical fourth quarter of Game 4. What stood out to you most? What stood out to you? Beyond the obvious stuff. The stuff everyone's talking about today is what it is. But were there some subtle things that caught your eye on the second look here?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, and I'm going to write about this on MassLive.com, so I don't want to spoil everything. But with around 5 minutes left, the Horford hook shot or whatever it was, with around 5 minutes left, it was an and one play, and then people will probably remember that play for like when Marcus and Giannis were down, and Marcus said he got hit in the face and everything.
Yep.
I thought that play was huge because one, it put the Celtics up like. Horford pretty much, he kind of hit this gut punch 3-point play. But two, right after that, Giannis needed a break. So he sat on the bench and he looked exhausted, right? Like we kept talking about this after, in the later parts of Game 3 and 4. Celtics are grinding this dude down. And I thought that was a big play. But I thought the subtle moment about that was actually Mike Budenholzer, like he subbed in George Hill for Giannis in that play. And we saw Tatum go right at George Hill on multiple possessions, right? Like the and one, the scoop shot, all these things like the rest of the quarter. And when Giannis, it was a quick break for Giannis. Obviously, like there's only 5 minutes left and the team is down. Like he can only rest for so much, right? But when Giannis came back in, I think Connaughton like hurt his left hand or something. So like the Bucks are kind of forced to go to like George Hill. And then, I remember B-Rob, I think at the end of the game, or I don't know if it was you, but somebody was like, why is George Hill in this game? Like, why are the Bucks going with this? And that was kind of part of the reason, right? Like Connaughton, I guess came out and everything in the Celtics. I thought that was like a big subtle play in the sense of like, one, the Celtics like really made Giannis tired, but two, like George Hill came on the court and Tatum forced switches on Hill. Like he kept attacking him and that. And obviously Horford's 30-point performance helped space the floor and kept, things open for Tatum. But I thought that was kind of like a low-key thing, kind of in the madness that looking back, I was like, whoa, this was kind of like a big deal. And Marcus went at Drew Holiday and all those things. But I thought right around that 5 minute mark, like it was still anybody's game at that point, and the Celtics just shut the door on the Bucks. And that was kind of the fruits of their effort for the whole game that I thought was, like I said, like a subtle thing that kind of popped out to me.
Yeah, that's because in the heat of the moment, you don't really figure out like, what's going on in terms of like subs and stuff like that as closely until you look back at it. But yeah, to your point about Giannis, that was like a 1-point game at that point. For him to have to come out of that. Yeah. Looking back at it now, it's like two things. One, it's like I'm shocked that Bud doesn't take a timeout there. Like if Giannis needs to come out, obviously you probably look at it again. Like I think they had an extra timeout to use. Yeah. But he tried to steal a minute.
Yeah, so they did take a timeout after the Horford. There was a stop and play after the Horford and one. But to your point, it was a 1-point Celtics lead. And I have this written down. But there was a stoppage in time and everything like that. So he did try to get, and to me that was kind of significant because they like Giannis could sit for a few minutes and he still needed like that 30
right. That's wild. Then. Like that's almost an indictment on Giannis. I mean, like and I guess, this is probably why they play him 33, 34 minutes in the regular season because they figured like he can't, like he gets gassed. And I guess that's what happens with big guys. Like we see it with Embiid all the time in past postseasons. And now it's especially, it's at one point, you're like, oh man, Giannis, you got to have it. But then the other time, like, okay, he's putting up 30 plus shots a game now and like doing everything for this team. So yeah, it's understandable he would be pretty gassed.
Yeah, so let me just clarify. So Celtics led by 1, and then the whole Marcus Giannis thing happens, and then Horford hits the hook shot to put them up 3, and it's an and one. So the Celtics actually took a timeout, and then that's when Giannis came out for George Hill, and it was a 4-point Celtics lead. So that's kind of the crazy thing. Like the Celtics were up 4. There's only 5 minutes left in the game, like in a crucial game 4 that like. It doesn't, right? Like we kept talking about how much of a swing game this was, and then Giannis had to come out because he was that gassed. And like, if you like, obviously, like like Marcus said, he got hit in the face by Giannis's leg or whatever. Like, if you look at the replay, I don't think it was like intentional. Like, I think part of it was like I think like Marcus's leg when he was moving it up or something like led to Giannis hitting him in the face or whatever. Like I don't think it was intentional, but like I don't know what Giannis was doing, but he looked gassed. Like he had no intention of running back on defense. And I think that was kind of the point, right? Like he didn't want Marcus to go back either. And
right.
It didn't matter because Horford hit this huge hook shot to pretty much kind of put the Celtics on top for final time. So like there's a lot of madness, I think, but that was like the one moment in the fourth quarter that I, looking back, I was like, whoa, like this was kind of like, there's a lot happening here. There's a lot happening in the fourth quarter in general, but between the substitutions and what ended up happening the rest of the game, I was kind of surprised that the Bucks, didn't take out George Hill. Ime was asked about it, obviously, and it was a funny moment, but it was still, to me, I was still a little surprised by the end of it and all the substitutions and all that madness.
Yeah, it's funny now, like George Hill in the 2019 playoffs absolutely like murdered the Celtics in that series in the second round. With like straight up like outplayed Kyrie Irving and would have the Bucks like putting up big runs when Giannis was on the bench. George Hill 3 years later is, not fully washed, but certainly not someone coming off of an injury that you would expect. You can see obviously Bud trusts him a lot to be like, okay, George Hill's back. We're going to throw him in to these pivotal moments. But it's just, I don't know, like he just like Tatum was just foaming at the mouth when he got to stay out there when Connaughton get out. But I guess that was the point of like how the Celtics kind of played this game down the stretch, and they went small. Pretty much played Brook Lopez off the floor to the point where the Bucks had to go small. They felt like to match up, and then that's when Tatum and Smart kind of had their way late after Horford kind of set the table for them early in the quarter.
Yeah. And Horford kind of said it after the game, like Marcus's impact was very well seen, but I thought he had a couple of huge plays. It wasn't just offense, like the charge he took on Giannis late in the game. Like I thought that was kind of like the moment where the Bucks were like, okay, like this might not happen, because to the Bucks' credit, like, and I'll write about this, and you can read about this more on masslive.com, and my thoughts will be formulated a little bit more. But like, I thought the Bucks did a very good job, like really digging deep, because there were multiple, like when the Celtics had it at 80 on that Horford dunk, or I guess 81 after the free throws, like it was anybody's game, and like the Celtics had all the momentum, but the Bucks kept punching back, like they threw haymakers multiple times. It's just that the Celtics had Al Horford hitting everything in the fourth quarter, and they also had Jason Tatum finally starting to heat up. Like the Celtics had to, like, this was no walk in the park in the fourth quarter, I thought, and I think that's what was most impressive from both teams. Like we keep talking about how tired Giannis was, and we keep talking about how impressive like Celtics were, but like both teams really showed like some in my opinion like some championship level basketball, and this is still like the second round, and that's the crazy part too, right? Like we saw great execution, great basketball in the first round that was very grindy, and then Celtics have another series like that against the defending champs. So, I just think the Celtics, like, they keep showing the resiliency, and not just in Game 4. We saw it in Game 3 too with them, and I think that's like one of the most important parts for the Celtics, because like, from here on out, like if they match up against the Heat and if they make it to the finals, like they're not going to have home court advantage. We talked about that last night after the game, and so being able to take care of it on the road, I thought in Game 4, they were 0 for 3 at Fiserv Forum, regular season, postseason combined, and taking care of business on Monday, I thought was a big deal, just because obviously it's a crucial swing game, but just good for the vibes, I think, especially after that third quarter.
Yeah, Jason Tatum even, in his post-game interview on the radio after the game, like he admitted as much, like that was our season, to everything you just said there. And they, like, because you're just not, even if you have home court, you're not coming back from 3-1 against Giannis. Like it's just not, like you can't count on him having duds in 3 straight games and the shooting luck to go your way in 3 straight games. It's possible, of course, but you can't realistically count on it. And who knows, again, like the Chris Middleton factor in this series, now he might be looming in the background for one of those games too, if it was go to 6 or 7. Now the Celtics are in a situation where they can take care of business back in Boston and have given themselves 2 shots to close this thing out. We did the old confidence meter in our last pod this week, Souichi. I think you were at a 5 or a 6, if I remember correctly, at that point, about the Celtics chance in series. How far up has that boosted now? Is this series not done, but are you how shocked would you be if the Bucks find a way to pull this thing out after letting that slip away?
I don't know about shock, just because these are the Bucks, right? Like, and I think the most impressive thing the Bucks did last season, quite bluntly, was that when they went down, I believe 3-2 to the Nets in the second round, and you heard it all, right? Like, I remember, like,
it's true.
I heard, right? I heard from down the grapevine or whatever, like Rick Carlisle was like a very real possibility to replace Bud when they were down 3-2 in the series, and then next thing you know, they're hoisting the trophy, right? Like, and sure, were they kind of lucky in terms of injuries and all that? Like, absolutely, right? But this is like, it's hard to win in the NBA. It's hard to win a title. They should get all the props in the world, and the Bucks keep showing like how mentally resilient of a team they are too, much like the Celtics. So I wouldn't be shocked, right? I still think. And I told a lot of people this before the game, and you too, B-Rob, I think. Like, I thought it was Bucks in 6 if they won game 4, whereas I thought it would probably go Celtics in 7 if the Celtics won game 4. So I think I would, in terms of like the confidence meter, I think it would still be at a 7-8. Like, right, like this is the playoffs. Like, if it does go 7, you just don't know what Giannis is going to do. He might drop 60 points on, good efficiency in game 7, even if it's on the road, right? Like, that's what happens when you have one of the best and arguably the best player in the world. Like, so I obviously, if you're a Celtics fan, you feel a lot more confident, right? But you're not going to get, vintage Al Horford every game. But at the same time, you hope for a little bit more from Jalen and Jason. And I think you are cautiously optimistic about Robb. Like, we haven't talked about Robb yet and his left knee soreness, but he wasn't giving you too much. But I thought even just having an extra body that you can at least count on for 20 minutes was huge, just because we saw last night with foul trouble and how much that can muck things up, like I thought
it was not the night for my guy Daniel Tice.
Yeah. And like, I just thought there were a few possessions where Al clearly, like couldn't go as hard as he wanted to on defense because he already had 3 fouls and he didn't want to pick up that 4th one. Like, I thought it was clear, like Giannis kept attacking him in the 3rd, and I was like, I don't know what you want Horford to do. Like, especially as we saw, like, Ime went small to close the lineup and they really need Horford out there. Like, he could not pick up that 4th foul. So I think, but to answer your question, I think you feel good, cautiously optimistic, but you are still going up against, in my opinion, the best player in the world right now. So you never know what'll happen.
It feels like it's been, this is like the conference finals or the NBA for this. And I don't know, like, it feels like the series has already gone 6 games. I would like the way this is kind of played out, just the amount of drama that has been on both sides in a lot of these matchups already. But the Rob Williams subplot is going to be fascinating to me in this series now, because it's not a long break anymore. It's every other day. Mm-hmm. And so not only if you're the Celtics, you're thinking about, you want to win immediately, but you also be like, oh, we don't want to sideline Rob for potentially much longer stretch of the postseason here if we're able to get past the Bucks. So the balance, the risk reward of that situation, and looking at, again, on terms of how, if they think they can get away with, not having him for another game or two in this series, with kind of the long view in mind, if that's ended up being like, hey, versus, this is the lineup. If we can go smaller anyway now, we know we can do that. Like, maybe we can let Rob rest up a little more than we would have, obviously, if we went down 3-1.
Yeah. And I don't know. Obviously, Grant Williams was pretty bad yesterday, right? So I think you'll get a better Grant, just because it wasn't just that he wasn't hitting shots. Like, I thought his defense was just kind of haphazard. Like, he was
not happy.
Yeah, it was just like all the things too, which was just like, not just, right? Like, this is Grant's kind of breakout season, so there's not much of a track record to be like, he's been doing this forever. But it's just like, I just think he'll be better just in terms of like just small time things like decision making, right? Like, I remember I looked up and I'm like, Grant has 2 turnovers and we're like 6 minutes into this game. Like, this is not, like, in your role, you should not even have like, 1 turnover is bad, much less 2, especially because the Celtics are horrible to start the game. So, but I still think the Celtics, right, and the Bucks can say this too in a lot of ways. Like, I still think this series, like with 3 games left, like I personally think like there's still 1 vintage Tatum game and 1 vintage Giannis game still in the works. So I'm curious. Like, I'm hoping it's in the same game in like game 7 or something, and we get some incredible basketball. But the one thing I want to add is just the sheer amount of bodies hitting the floor every possession, it feels like, is just ridiculous. Like, I want somebody to do like an unofficial count of like how many bodies hit the floor per possession. And I bet it's like one of the, unofficially like 1.5. Highest you'll see. Yeah, something crazy, right? Like playoff record or something. If those stats were counted, I feel like it's just ridiculous out there, I think.
It's madness. It's coming back to Boston for Game 5 on Wednesday night. Souichi, you will be there at the Garden. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at Souichi Terada, Souichi Terada. And he'll have a great piece coming up on Matt's Live too, just breaking down those important subtle moments we saw in that fourth quarter that ultimately helped prove the difference. So that's it for us. We'll be back with you guys later this week. And Souichi, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.